Look at this pristine glass tower. It seems structurally sound, built to last, but down at its base, a microscopic crack is spiderwebbing. That is exactly how a business fails. You have great sales and a product people love. Everything looks flawless outside, but underneath, a tiny fracture is preparing to bring it all down. Most business owners obsess over the bulk of their operations, the things they already do well. But failure rarely comes from the obvious 95% of a company that functions normally. This chart shows how that breakdown happens. You have a massive 95% chunk operating in solid, stable green, but there's a tiny 5% sliver pulsing red. These are the broken operations, the minor inefficiencies, and the awkward customer interactions that owners willfully ignore. Over time, that ignored 5% corrupts the healthy sections and eventually kills the business. Tilman Fertitta built a hospitality empire from a single restaurant to a multi-billion-dollar portfolio that includes Landry's and the NBA's Houston Rockets. He credits his massive growth to a mindset he calls productive paranoia, the daily act of worrying about every detail of your business, even when things are going perfectly and there's nothing obvious to fear. To survive, you have to stop patting yourself on the back for what you do right. You have to obsessively hunt down that broken 5% before it destroys the company. Many entrepreneurs operate under a dangerous assumption. If they deliver a high-quality product, they are automatically delivering good hospitality. But an excellent meal or a flawless piece of software means nothing if the customer feels alienated during the transaction. Fertitta identified a massive blind spot in customer service: the word no. When an employee tells a buyer no, it sends a very specific signal. It tells the customer that their business is completely expendable. There is a strict difference between a business being genuinely unable to fulfill a request and simply choosing not to because it's slightly inconvenient. Customers can instantly tell when a business is just taking the easy way out. To fix this, you have to rip the word no out of your company's vocabulary and replace it with a qualified yes. If a diner asks for a breakfast dish long after the morning service has ended, a flat refusal costs you a returning patron. A qualified yes means offering an alternative. You tell them you can't make that exact dish right now, but you offer them a discount to come back the next morning to enjoy it. By stripping outright refusal from your daily operations and catering to the masses with creative alternatives, you immediately change the dynamic. A potentially disgruntled patron transforms into a lifelong, compounding stream of revenue. Keeping customers happy is only one side of the equation. Business owners routinely blind themselves by staring at top-line revenue instead of actual profit margins. High sales volume can mask a company's slow death. If your costs exceed your margins, every new customer moves you closer to bankruptcy. You're working harder for the privilege of losing more money. This flowchart illustrates the most common silent killer lurking in that 5% blind spot: a lack of working capital. Working capital refers to the cash on hand available for daily operations. You can see a high volume of demand flowing into the system, but right here, the bottleneck chokes off the funds required to actually manufacture and deliver on a massive incoming order. When that bottleneck fully closes, the entire system shuts down. Without cash on hand to bridge the time gap between making a product and receiving payment for it, even a booming business with massive customer demand will stall out and die. If a lack of cash doesn't kill you, the second major financial trap will: the inflexible long-term property lease. Entrepreneurs often sign long agreements to secure a physical location without negotiating exit clauses. If the business fails and operations cease, those long-term lease liabilities remain entirely active. That monthly rent bill can personally bankrupt an entrepreneur for years after they've locked the doors. True financial mastery requires looking past the daily cash register. It requires aggressively negotiating buyout clauses with landlords and strictly hoarding cash so you can survive the inevitable delays in payment. In the 1980s, falling oil prices triggered a massive banking collapse across Texas. It was an uncontrollable macroeconomic disaster that wiped out thousands of seemingly stable businesses overnight. Every bank Fertitta was doing business with failed. But because his financial records were in order, the FDIC, the federal agency that insures bank deposits, granted him a 5-year reprieve on making his loan payments.
He took the working capital he had aggressively hoarded and the money he would have spent on loan payments and deployed it. While his competitors panicked and folded, Fertitta rapidly expanded his restaurant empire across the state. Securing those blind spots and stockpiling capital during the good times turns a market crash into a strategic advantage. It creates the liquidity needed to aggressively seize market share while competitors are paralyzed by panic. So how do you actually identify your unique 5% blind spot before a financial crisis forces it out into the open? Fertitta's directive is characteristically blunt. As a leader, you have to shut up and listen to the unvarnished truth about your operations. There are 3 mandatory sources of truth you must consult daily. First, you have to listen to the financials, because the numbers never lie. Second, you must listen to your customers, because they will readily highlight your flaws. And third, you have to listen to partners who possess complementary strengths and can see the errors you naturally miss. Beyond just listening, there is an absolute psychological requirement for long-term survival: staying hungry. Relying on past successes or justifying outdated operations because that's how things have always been done is a death sentence. That mindset ignores shifts in technology and customer habits, leaving the company stagnant while the market moves on without it. Building a billion-dollar empire doesn't rely on having a flawless initial product. It relies entirely on the daily, paranoid discipline of finding and fixing the tiny flaws actively trying to kill your business.